Imagine being a successful writer with millions of fans. Now imagine one of those fans deciding that you belong to them. That's basically the nightmare scenario at the heart of Misery, a story that proves sometimes the scariest monsters don't wear masks, they bring you soup and call themselves your #1 fan. Let's break it down. Paul Sheldon is a successful novelist who writes a series of very popular Victorian romance books about a character named Misery Chastain. The books sell like crazy. People love them. Bookstores love them. His publisher definitely loves them. Paul, however, absolutely hates them. To him, these books are like that one song an artist wrote years ago that fans refuse to stop requesting. He wants to move on. He wants to write something serious, something meaningful, something that doesn't involve corsets and dramatic fainting spells. So Paul does something bold. He finishes his final Misery novel and kills the character off. Goodbye, Misery. Goodbye, corsets. Feeling free for the first time in years, Paul leaves his writing cabin in the snowy mountains of Silver Creek, Colorado. His plan is simple: drive to New York City and start a new chapter of his career. Unfortunately for Paul, the universe has other plans. While driving through a brutal snowstorm, his car skids off the road, flips over an embankment, and crashes into a pile of snow. Paul is badly injured, his legs are shattered, and his shoulder is dislocated. But don't worry, someone finds him. And that someone is Annie Wilkes, Paul's guardian angel. Just kidding. Annie rescues Paul from the wreck, brings him to her remote mountain home, and nurses him back to consciousness. When Paul wakes up, he learns two important things. First, both his legs are broken. Second, Annie is his #1 fan. At first, this seems like great luck. Annie's a nurse, so she knows how to care for him. She feeds him soup, gives him medication, and tells him that once the roads are cleared and the phone lines are fixed, she'll contact the outside world. She asks Paul if she can read his newest Misery novel, while she was unaware that her favorite character Misery dies in it. Paul agrees to let her read it. But there's just one small problem. Annie Wilkes is not exactly stable. Her mood swings are legendary. One minute she's cheerful and nurturing, the next minute she's screaming about profanity and literature, like a Victorian librarian who just discovered Twitter. She tells him about her early days when her husband left her, and she was all alone reading the Misery novels again and again and again. So much that she named her pet piggy Misery. When she starts reading it, at first she's overwhelmed by the script of the novel and tells Paul it's some brilliant shit. But as she continues, it's obvious this does not go well. Annie explodes into a full emotional meltdown. She comes in Paul's room with her other cute personality and was about to hit him with a chair, but throws it across the room and rants about how Paul betrayed his readers. In her mind, Misery is not just a fictional character. Misery is sacred. And killing her off? Unforgivable. That's when Annie drops a little bombshell. She never told anyone about the car crash. No police, no hospital, no missing person report. For as far as the world knows, Paul Sheldon simply vanished. The next day, Annie suddenly acts cheerful again, which is somehow even more terrifying. She tells Paul she has a solution to their problem. He must write a brand new novel where Misery miraculously comes back to life. Until he does, Paul isn't going anywhere. To motivate him, she forces Paul to burn the only copy of the serious novel he just finished, the book that was supposed to start his new career. Imagine spending months writing your dream project and watching your biggest fan light it on fire. So Paul does the only thing he can do. He starts writing. Annie even buys him typing paper and an old typewriter, like a very supportive kidnapper who really cares about creative productivity. But Paul isn't just writing, he's planning. He asks Annie to buy some different paper because his current paper smudges, to which she responds with another fit of rage. While Annie leaves the house, Paul begins exploring. Using a stolen bobby pin, he unlocks the bedroom door and sneaks around the house in a wheelchair. What he finds is not encouraging. The phone line is dead, the doors are locked, and Annie's house is basically a cozy prison. He also accidentally knocks over a decorative ceramic penguin and puts it back facing the wrong direction, a small mistake that will come back to haunt him later. Paul barely makes it back to his room before Annie returns. Over the next several days, Paul tries different schemes to escape. At one point, he secretly crushes his pain pills into powder and attempts to drug Annie by putting it in her wine during a celebratory dinner. Unfortunately, Annie accidentally spills the drink before taking a sip, ruining his plan. Meanwhile, the local sheriff begins investigating Paul's disappearance after his car is found buried in the snow. Then, Paul discovers something even worse. While Annie is away one day, Paul sneaks out again and discovers a scrapbook full of newspaper clippings. The articles reveal a horrifying truth. Annie has a long history of mysterious deaths surrounding her, including patients, co-workers, and even people from her childhood. So yes, Paul is definitely being held hostage by a murderer. Naturally, Paul begins plotting his escape. Then things get even worse. Annie realizes that Paul left his room because of this tiny penguin. Hello? Her response is memorable. Calmly, and in one of the most infamous scenes in movie history, she punishes him by hobbling him with a sledgehammer to make sure he can never walk away again. At this point, Paul's situation has officially upgraded from bad to absolutely horrifying. Meanwhile, the Sheriff Buster is investigating Paul's disappearance. Piece by piece, he follows clues that eventually lead to Annie's home. Hope arrives. For about 30 seconds. Buster discovers Paul drugged in the basement, but Annie catches him and blasts him with a shotgun from behind. Just like that, the rescue mission is over. Now Annie has a new plan. She intends to kill Paul and then herself. A dramatic murder-suicide worthy of a tragic romance novel. But Paul convinces her to wait until he finishes the book. After all, Annie deserves to know how Misery's story ends. And Annie, being the world's most terrifying book club member, agrees. Finally, the night arrives. When he finally finishes the new Misery manuscript, he asks Annie to celebrate with champagne and cigarettes, as it was his classic way of celebrating, and Annie knew it too, so she agrees happily. But Paul has been preparing for this moment. While Annie is in the kitchen, he hides a can of lighter fluid. When she returns, Paul proudly presents the final pages of the manuscript and then suddenly pours lighter fluid all over it. Annie panics. She begs him not to burn the book, but Paul lights the manuscript on fire. Now Annie will never know how Misery's story ends. While she's distracted, Paul smashes her over the head with the typewriter. What follows is a brutal, chaotic fight between a broken writer and an unhinged fan. Annie attacks. Paul fights back. There's screaming, gunshots, and enough violence to make the entire publishing industry nervous. Eventually, Annie collapses, smashing head first into the typewriter. But even then, she refuses to die quietly. The struggle ends when Paul grabs a heavy iron doorstop and delivers the final blow. Annie Wilkes, the most dedicated fan in literary history, is finally gone. 18 months later, Paul is living in New York City. He walks with a cane now, but his career has taken off again. His first non-misery novel is a critical and commercial success. Ironically, the nightmare he survived rekindled his passion for writing. His agent even suggests writing a non-fiction book about the experience. Paul politely declines. Some stories are better left in the past. But the trauma still lingers. At a restaurant, a waitress approaches Paul, and for a moment he hallucinates that it's Annie. Then she smiles and says something that sends a chill down his spine. "I'm your #1 fan." Paul forces a smile and replies quietly, "That's very sweet of you," because after Annie Wilkes, fan appreciation hits a little differently.